if I took away your business card today, deleted your LinkedIn profile, and stripped your degrees off the wall and told you that you could never introduce yourself by your title again, would you still know who you are? But here's the spiritual truth. Who you are is not what you do. It's almost like we build these golden idols of ourselves to show the world who we are, but then something comes along to rock our worlds and we don't know who we are at our core. You've seen people who get laid off and they lose their minds. It's because their complete identity is attached in who their job says that they are. And now that they no longer have the job, they don't have an identity. That's not true. Point number one, the danger of anchoring your identity to external circumstances and external things. Things can change. Businesses can go under. Titles can be stripped away. LinkedIn can eject you off of LinkedIn. And if you lose your value when something happens, then you've lost your sense of self. If a job says that you're no longer valuable to them, that doesn't mean that you don't have value, just don't have value to them. And I've had clients before, they work with me, of course, who took pay cuts in order to get their foot in the door, and they were fully qualified and should have actually doubled their salary, which is what we did, after they got laid off because they lost their sense of value once an organization said that they were no longer valuable to them. This is a problem. So once you start to become clear on who you are, why you're here, and what you're meant to do in this world, then that's a better compass point than attaching yourself to your title. And if this is actually blowing your mind when you don't know what I'm talking about, I want y'all to lean in a little bit. When I resigned from the Coast Guard with 3.5 years left to retire, I left in 5 weeks. I didn't have this succession plan, and I didn't have a pension, and I didn't have a countdown. I had to leave or I was going to work myself to death. And so I'm Lieutenant Commander Rutherford. I am seriously the greatest person to have ever done it. This is in my mind. Y'all see I don't flicker when I say that. Now here's what I didn't know. I didn't know that civilians didn't know military rank. I didn't know that when I walked in the room, people didn't know that I was like the Queen of Zamunda and they should have been throwing flowers at my feet. So I'm at Panera Bread and somebody would ask me something, I'd be like, I'm Lieutenant Commander Rutherford, i.e. put respect on my name and throw flowers at my feet. And people would be like, oh, and they would feel sorry for me. I'm confused, y'all. And they would be like, well, do you have PTSD? No. Have you seen battle? No. I just told you I was in the Coast Guard. And then they would be like, well, you must have been admin then. And I'm like, wait, what? And then they would straighten up and go, thank you for your service, Sergeant. Boom. Now, I'm not knocking sergeants because sergeants like being a sergeant, but lieutenant commanders is a whole different rank structure. And I would just explode and start cussing them out. I'm just going to tell the truth. Crazy. And then they would be like, I knew you had PTSD. And then they would walk off laughing. Now, here's the thing. My entire beingness and identity was wrapped up into the persona, the golden idol that I created of myself for 16 years. And when that went away quickly, I had no idea who I was. When I had nothing to put on my LinkedIn profile, like nothing, I panicked. And it's like this blank slate and it's terrifying. So when I see people who say when they got laid off, their whole world crumbled and they don't know who they are, I have been there. And this is the danger of attaching your identity to external things, because if something breaks, you break when the only thing that should have broke was the job. So I ask, if LinkedIn deleted your profile and you had to start over, would you be okay? Would you be okay if you left your industry and had to start over in a new industry where you had to prove yourself again? Would you be okay with that? And here's the thing, it's not necessarily that you have to prove yourself again, it's that you think you have to prove yourself because you're somewhere new. But I want to be 100% clear with you. You are never a beginner. You are never a scrub. You are never somebody who started over, even if everything gets wiped out. If you know who you are to your core, if you know why you're here to your core, if you know who you are and that you're the greatest to ever do it down to the cellular level, it doesn't matter what happens externally. The work is really internal. Point number 2, the dark night of the soul, what happens when the labels fall off. I burned out in 2012. I really mentally collapsed 18 months later in 2013 because I took the same bad habits of overworking and being everything to everybody. And now I have the next set of people that I have to prove wrong. I took all of that relentless work ethic into entrepreneurship, starting over, thinking that I had to prove the next set of people wrong, not knowing what I was doing, learning all these new skills. It led to my stage 12 mental collapse where I burned my brain down to 2 atoms. And I had burned through my 6-figure savings. It had been about a year. I'm a 6-figure earner. I'm bougie. Blew through all of that because God told me that I would be rich. And I thought it would take 2 months. So here's the thing. I ended up moving in with my brother in South Carolina because I didn't have any money, but because I mentally collapsed, I couldn't now make any money. And as I would say, I languished in South Carolina. It took me 4 years to put myself back together mentally and 7 years to recover financially. But as I started to think about the things that I had done and all of the things that I had attached my identity to and never really feeling successful and continuing to just work myself relentlessly, I had no idea who I was outside of my career. I had no idea who I was outside of my achievements. But once I fell apart mentally, MBA couldn't save me. That Legion of Merit, that award that I got could not save me. All the medals and the awards, and I want to be clear, I got a lot. None of those could save me from myself. And so as I started to work to think about who I wanted to be, and one of the things that I talked about in an earlier video was thinking about who I wanted to be 5 years later and how I wanted to show up in my mental and my physical health and owning all of the great things that I had done that I never thought about. I ended up in a parking lot one day and I had an argument with God. This was a turning point moment for me, and it was really the turnaround of when I started to build my awareness of who I was. But I'm in this parking lot and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and I just bust out crying. And I'm like, God, what is going on? How could I, the Christy Rutherford, now Commander Rutherford, end up here in this state? Give me my money so I can get back to it. And I started to list off all the things that I had done and all the awards that I have and all the degrees that I have. And God asked me a question as clear as day. He said, are you still that person with all of these things, even if you don't have the money? And I was like, God, look, ain't nobody got time to be playing these word games. We not playing Scrabble. I want my money back and I want to be restored. And he asked me again, but are you still that person who achieved those things even if you don't have the money? Because at the time, it wasn't the next award that I needed. I needed to heal, but I also wanted my money. So as you think about as a high achiever, we're always trying to attach our value to something that's external. It could be a multitude of boxes that you can attach your identity to. Mine at the time, my value was attached to my money because I'm in South Carolina and I'm bougie and I need my money. And so God asked me, are you still the person who achieved all those things, even if you don't have the money? And I promise you, we went back and forth probably for like 10 minutes. It felt like an eternity. And once I finally got it, it wasn't my achievements that made me great. I did that. It wasn't the awards or the rank or the titles that made me great. I did that. So I offer this to you because you are more exceptional than you're owning. You're greater than you're aware of. You have checked all the boxes and you've done all the things that you need to do to prove that you are worthy. Now I want you to believe that you are worthy. I want you to understand it and I want you to own it, and I want you to look in the mirror and say, I am the greatest person who's ever done it. And once you start to own that value, once you start to own who you are, and it's not bragging if it's true. It's not bragging if it's true. Once you start to own how great you are, you'll stop working hard to prove to people how great you are. You'll own it. Once you start owning how great you are, you won't have the imposter syndrome, because the imposter is the person who doesn't believe that they're good enough because you're exceptional. I want you to start to think about and take inventory of all the great things that you've done, not just for yourself, but for other people, and own it. And then relax into the awareness that You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You just need to own yourself and own how great you already are, regardless of anything that you have, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of the titles and all these other kind of things. Own who you are and how great you are to your core. And once you get that level of awareness, nothing, and I mean nothing, can shake you from it. So for the next 24 hours, I want you to start to catch yourself when you start to feel that you're not enough, or you want to prove that you're enough, or you're putting your ego out and your chest out and you're telling people who you are based on your title. Just be like, no, I'm great. So when you stop proving, you start owning. So what happens when you stop identifying yourself as your titles? You start to just own how great you already are. And this is when doors will open for you that no man can shut. This is the confidence that you're looking for. Confidence isn't an external thing. Confidence is awareness. This is the peace that surpasses understanding because you know who you are. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, not the renewing of your job or the renewing of your title or the renewing of your check, by the renewing of your mind. Come into awareness of how great you already are. You don't have to prove it. You just need to own it. And in the next video, we're going to go deeper. So I hope you stick with me. We're going to talk about why we lie to ourselves, the spiritual cost of dishonesty. I'm going to go deep, but it will set you free. Hit the notification bell to know when this comes out. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, go ahead and share it with a friend and leave me a comment of what is your greatest takeaway and if you're going to own how great you already are this week. And if you're watching this video a little later, it's going to be right here. See you in the next video.